This happened during my sophomore year of college, and I've never been able to fully explain it. Even now, 5 years later, I find myself checking my closet before bed. I know how irrational that sounds. I was 19, living in a dorm at a state university in Ohio. My roommate, who I'll call Shane, was really into paranormal stuff. He had books about hauntings, listened to ghost story podcasts, and was always trying to get people to go explore the old abandoned church near campus. Most of us thought he was weird, but harmless. One Friday night in late October, Shane convinced me and 2 friends from our floor, Debbie and Chase, to try a Ouija board in our dorm room. He'd bought one from a thrift store for $3. It looked old and beat up. The letters faded and the wood slightly warped. Debbie joked about it being authentically haunted. We all laughed. None of us were taking it seriously. That was the problem. We waited until around 11 p.m., when our floor quieted down. Shane lit a few candles and turned off the overhead lights. The 4 of us sat on the floor with the board between us and placed our fingers on the planchette. I remember my hands were sweating. Shane asked the typical questions. Is anyone there? What's your name? At first, nothing happened. Chase accused Shane of moving it. Shane accused Chase. But after maybe 10 minutes, the planchette started sliding more smoothly. It spelled out Eliza. Debbie asked how old Eliza was. The planchette moved to 8. Shane asked how she died. It spelled Fire. We all got quiet. The mood shifted. I asked, half joking to break the tension, if Eliza could prove she was real. The planchette sat still. Then it started moving. Ask Debbie about her bird. Debbie pulled her hands off the planchette like it had shocked her. Her face had gone pale. We asked what it meant. She didn't answer at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. She told us that when she was 6 years old, she had a pet parakeet. One winter night, she forgot to close her bedroom window before bed. The bird froze to death overnight. She said she'd never told anyone. Not her parents, not her therapist. No one. It was a secret she'd carried alone for over a decade. Chase said one of us must have known somehow. Maybe she'd mentioned it and forgotten. But I saw Debbie's face. She wasn't confused or surprised. She was terrified in a way that told me this was real to her. She left the room without another word. Shane wanted to keep going. Chase and I stayed, I think, because neither of us wanted to be the one who got scared off. We put our fingers back on the planchette. Shane asked if Eliza was still there. The response was immediate. No. I swear the room felt colder. I told myself it was just the old building's heating. Shane asked who we were talking to. The planchette moved slowly. I watch. Chase asked what that meant. The board spelled, "You sleep with your door open, Chase." Chase lived in a single room at the end of the hall. He always slept with his door cracked because his room didn't have good airflow. It was a small detail, the kind of thing you wouldn't think twice about. But it wasn't something any of us would have known to say. He stood up without a word and left. I could see his hands shaking. That left just me and Shane. I should have stopped. Shane asked if the entity had anything to say to him. The planchette moved. Your mom forgives you for not calling. Shane's mother had died of cancer the summer before college. I knew they'd had a complicated relationship, but I didn't know details. He never talked about it. He moved the planchette to goodbye himself. Then he just sat there, staring at the board, and I realized he was crying. I went to bed that night, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Subconscious movements. Lucky guesses. But I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard something. A soft sound, like fingernails being dragged across wood. It was coming from my closet door. Not from inside the closet. From the door itself. Just a slow, quiet scratching. I lay frozen, listening. It lasted maybe 20 seconds. Then it stopped. I didn't get up to check. I couldn't. In the morning, I looked at the closet door. There was nothing there. No marks, no scratches. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was more unsettled because if there was nothing there, then what had I heard? I know how this sounds. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was half asleep and my brain filled in something that wasn't real. But here's the thing that still bothers me. A few weeks later, I ran into Debbie in the dining hall. She looked tired. I asked if she was okay. She said she'd been having trouble sleeping since that night. Said she kept having dreams about fire. Then she asked me something that made my stomach drop. She asked if I ever heard scratching at night, around 3 a.m. I never told her about what I heard. We never talked about it again. I can't prove anything happened. I can't prove the board knew things it shouldn't have. Maybe it was all subconscious. Maybe Shane somehow knew about the bird. Maybe the scratching was just the old building settling. But I've never touched a Ouija board since, and I don't think I ever will. I was 14 when this happened, and I'm 26 now. I still sleep with a lamp on. I've tried to stop, but every time I turn it off, I lie there in the dark and feel like something is in the room with me. My therapist says it's anxiety. Maybe she's right. But I know when it started. It was the summer between 8th and 9th grade. My best friend Nora was having a sleepover at her house for her birthday. There were 5 of us. Nora lived in an old house in rural Pennsylvania. The kind of place where you can't see your neighbors. And the darkness at night is complete. No streetlights. No ambient glow. Just black. Around midnight, after Nora's parents went to bed, she pulled out a Ouija board. Her older cousin had left it there after a visit. Most of us were nervous, but excited. One girl, Taylor, refused to participate. She said her church had taught her that Ouija boards were genuinely dangerous. She said she'd watch but wouldn't touch it. We teased her a little, but she wouldn't budge. The 4 of us who agreed sat around the board in Nora's basement. It was partially finished, with wood paneling and old carpet that smelled like mildew. There was a small window near the ceiling that looked out at ground level to the backyard. It was nothing but black out there. Nora asked if anyone was with us. After a minute, the planchette moved. It spelled Raymond. Nora asked how old Raymond was. 43. She asked if he had lived in the house. Yes. She asked how he died. Hanged. We all got quiet. Another girl, Kayla, asked if Raymond was at peace. The planchette moved to no. That's when I asked a question I've regretted ever since. I asked if Raymond was good or evil. The planchette started moving in circles. Fast circles around the board. Faster than felt natural. It was like it was pulling our fingers along. Then it stopped abruptly and spelled hungry. Taylor made a noise from the corner. A sharp intake of breath. She was staring at the basement window. I looked up. There was a face in the window. Just for a second. I couldn't make out details because it was dark and the glass was dirty. But I saw a pale shape. Something that looked like a face pressed close to the glass. Then it was gone. Everyone screamed. Nora knocked the board off the table. We ran upstairs and woke her parents. Her dad went outside with a flashlight and checked around the house for 20 minutes. He didn't find anyone. No footprints in the flower bed under the window. No sign anyone had been there. Her parents assumed we'd scared ourselves and imagined something in the dark glass. Maybe a reflection. Maybe just shapes our brains turned into a face. They took the board and told us to go to sleep. We stayed up all night with the lights on. We barely talked about what we'd seen. In the morning, I went home and tried to forget about it. But something changed after that night. I started waking up at night, always around the same time, between 3 and 3:30. I'd be suddenly awake, heart pounding, absolutely certain someone was in my room. I'd lie there in the dark, too scared to move, listening for breathing that wasn't my own. Most nights, I'd eventually convince myself I was being paranoid and fall back asleep. But some nights, I'd hear something. A faint sound, almost like breathing, coming from the corner of my room. When I'd finally work up the courage to turn on the light, there was never anything there. This went on for weeks. I started sleeping with my lamp on because I couldn't handle waking up in complete darkness anymore. My parents thought I was just going through a phase. They didn't know about the Ouija board. I never told them. The worst night was about a month after the sleepover. I woke up at 3:15 a.m. and immediately knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, and I felt absolutely certain that if I rolled over, something would be standing next to my bed. I lay there for what felt like hours, not moving, barely breathing. Eventually, I fell back asleep. When I woke up in the morning, there were 3 thin scratches on my left forearm. They weren't deep enough to bleed, just red marks like someone had dragged fingernails across my skin. I have a cat, so my mom assumed she scratched me in my sleep. But my cat wasn't in my room that night. My door had been closed. I eventually told my mom I was having trouble sleeping. She took me to our family doctor, who said it was probably anxiety and suggested I try keeping a regular sleep schedule. The nighttime feelings gradually became less intense over the following months, but they never fully went away. Years later, in college, I tried to research the history of Nora's house. I didn't find any record of someone named Raymond dying there, but I did find an old county newspaper archive that mentioned a suicide in that area in the late 1960s. A man in his 40s. The article didn't give the address or method of death. It might have been the same house. It might not have been. I didn't dig deeper. I'm not sure I wanted to know. I'm 26 now. I still sleep with a light on. I still sometimes wake up at 3 a.m. with the feeling that I'm not alone. Maybe it's just anxiety that started that summer and never quite went away. Maybe my brain created a pattern and I've never been able to break it. But sometimes, in the dark, I still feel like something is watching. And I wonder if whatever was at that window followed me home. I need to tell someone about this because I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I need to know if I'm being rational. This started 8 months ago when my grandmother passed away and I inherited her house. I'm 31 and work as an accountant. I've always been skeptical of anything supernatural. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits. Or at least, I didn't. Now I'm not sure what I believe. My grandmother's house was a small 2-story in rural Vermont. It had been in the family since the 1920s. After the funeral, my parents asked me to clear it out since they live in Florida. I took 2 weeks off work and drove up from Boston. The house felt strange when I arrived. I told myself it was just grief. The empty rooms, her things still where she'd left them. But there was something else, a heaviness I couldn't explain. Like the air was thicker inside than outside. On my 3rd day, I went up to the attic to sort through old boxes. That's where I found it. At the bottom of an old trunk, wrapped in a black cloth, was a Ouija board. It looked handmade. The letters were painted rather than printed, and the wood was dark and worn smooth. Under the board was a small leather notebook. It was my grandmother's handwriting. The entries were dated 1958, when she would have been in her early 20s. They described seances she'd conducted with her younger sister Mary and some friends. The early entries were excited. They thought they were contacting spirits, getting messages from dead relatives. But as I read further, the tone changed. There were mentions of things going wrong. Mary not feeling well. Bad dreams. A feeling of being watched. The last entry was dated November 1958. The handwriting looked rushed, almost frantic. It said, "Something is wrong. Mary won't wake up properly. She says things in her sleep, things in a voice that isn't hers. I'm putting the board away. I should have listened. God help us." Mary was my grandmother's sister. She died young, sometime in the late 1950s. The family never talked about it. I always assumed it was an illness. Reading that notebook, I wasn't so sure anymore. I know what you're thinking. A rational person would have put the board back and forgotten about it. But I was grieving. I missed my grandmother. And some part of me, the part that wanted desperately to believe there was something after death, wanted to try. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the board. I lit a candle because it felt appropriate. I put my fingers on the planchette and asked if anyone was there. For a few minutes, nothing happened. I felt foolish. Then, the planchette started to move. Slowly at first. It spelled Thomas. My name. I hadn't said it out loud. My hands were shaking. I asked who I was speaking to. Grandma. I started crying. I asked if she was okay. The planchette moved to yes. I asked if she missed me. Yes. For the next half hour, I asked questions. About our family. About her life. About things I'd always wondered. The answers felt right. They felt like her. She mentioned our old family cat by name. She referenced a nickname only she used for my grandfather. It was comforting. It felt real. Then I asked about Mary. The planchette stopped moving. The room felt colder, though that might have been my imagination. When it moved again, it spelled no. I asked why not. The planchette moved faster now, more forcefully. Don't ask. I should have stopped. But I pushed. I asked what happened to Mary. The planchette went to goodbye and stopped. The candle flickered. And then I heard something upstairs. A soft thud, like a footstep. I told myself it was the old house settling. But then I heard another one. And another. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving across the floor above me. There was no one else in the house. I left. I grabbed my keys and walked out the front door and sat in my car until sunrise. I told myself I'd imagined it. Old houses make noises. I was emotional and tired, and my brain was playing tricks on me. I went back in the morning and finished packing up the house. I threw the Ouija board in the trash. I drove back to Boston and tried to forget about the whole thing, but something changed after that night. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with the absolute certainty that someone was in my apartment. My dog, who normally sleeps on my bed, started refusing to come into the bedroom at night. She'd stand at the doorway and whine but wouldn't cross the threshold. Small things started happening. I'd put my keys on the counter and find them on the kitchen table. I'd close a cabinet door and come back to find it open. Little things that could easily be explained by forgetfulness or carelessness. But they kept happening. The dreams are the worst part. Every few nights, I have the same dream. I'm in my grandmother's attic, looking at that trunk, and I can feel something behind me, breathing, waiting. I try to turn around, but I can't move. Then I wake up. I don't know what to think anymore. Maybe I'm just grieving and my mind is processing it in strange ways. Maybe the stress of clearing out my grandmother's house triggered some kind of anxiety I'd never had before. That's probably the rational explanation. But sometimes, Late at night when I'm lying in bed and my dog is whining at the door, I remember what my grandmother wrote in that notebook about something being wrong, about Mary saying things in a voice that wasn't hers. And I wonder what happened in that house in 1958. I wonder what they let in. And I wonder if, after 60 years of waiting, it finally found someone else. I sold the house last month. I couldn't bring myself to spend another night there. But whatever is happening to me, it didn't stay behind. And that's the part that scares me most.